Okay, here we go. Turn your brains on. All of the equations that we've looked at so far, right? They started out with a squared binomial. In this case, a squared binomial of y. For this problem, we wrote a squared binomial for x. Here we had x squared and no other x terms of any kind. So I could go straight to x minus 0 squared. With this problem, it was y squared. There were no other y terms of any kind in this problem. So I could go straight to y minus 0 squared. Not everything in this world is perfect, and we get to situations like this. In this problem, we have y squared. So again, what do we know right away? We know, first of all, this is a parabola. We know that it's going to open to the left or to the right because y is the squared variable. The difference with this problem is everything's on one side. There isn't x and some number over here and y squared all by itself. There's another y term. And they're telling you exactly how to approach this problem. We did this in chapter 2 with quadratics in standard form. When you see a squared variable and a non-squared variable, you have to complete the square in order to end up with something that looks like this. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for a squared binomial of y. The only way we're going to get something like that, and let me say this directly to the camera, the only way you're going to get y minus k squared, the only way that's going to happen is by completing the square when you have an extra y term like this. Okay? Now we've done this before. Okay? So let's not panic. Right? We want to end up in this scenario. We want to end up here. So we want the y stuff on one side. We want everything else on the other. We only want the y stuff over here. Okay? So we're going to start that process by putting the y stuff on one side. Notice the space. Leave the space. And putting everything else to the other side. So the positive 4x and the positive 25 are getting moved over here where the 0 was, right? I'm subtracting this and I'm subtracting this over to the other side. This is how we're going to start our completing of the square process. We have y squared minus 10y. You remember from chapter 2, we cannot complete the square if there's a coefficient for y squared, but there isn't, so we can go to work. We take half of this number. Half of negative 10 is negative 5, and then we square that. Right? Remember when we did this before? I don't want to make too much to do here, but we take negative 10 off to the side. Right? We're off in the margin here now. We're taking half of that, and then we're squaring that number, and that's what gets plugged back into here. Now, here's where things get different, because this is a little bit of a change to what we did before. I added 25 on the left side of this equation. Now, I have an equation set up. So if you remember back in chapter 2, it was, well, whatever I do inside the parentheses, I have to undo outside the parentheses, right? If you remember that process. Well, there's no parentheses here. I've separated the x and the y's. We've got both variables that are on opposite sides of the equation. So really what I did here is I added 25 on the left-hand side. But since this is an equation, I can balance this out, not by undoing this, but by doing the same thing over here. So it's the same idea, and I know it's hard to understand this a little bit the first time you do it, but because I have an equation set up, I can keep that equation balanced by whatever I add here, I also add that over there. So where are we at this point? We have y squared minus 10y plus 25 equals negative 4x. And this isn't always going to happen, but these terms are opposites and they cancel. But now that I have this trinomial set up, I can write that as the squared binomial y minus 5 squared. Remember that this number here is whatever that was divided by 2. So when I took negative 10 and I divided it by 2, and then squared it, whatever it was before I squared it, that's what goes here. Okay? And that is equal to negative 4x. Now we're in a situation that we were in, similar to that before. Okay? So we've written our standard form equation. Look, we have a squared binomial for y. We have a stand-in coefficient for that 4p. and we have x. Now we don't have x minus h, but remember we've done this before. If there's nothing else over here, we can do this. Now it's x minus 0. Now this looks exactly like that. And we can go to work with the rest of this problem, right? What's the vertex? The vertex is whatever I'm subtracting from x and whatever I'm subtracting from y. The focus is p units away from the vertex. Where's p? Don't laugh. This is 4p, right? Whatever the coefficient is for x, that's equal to 4p. So p in this case is equal to -1. That's going to tell me where the focus is. Remember, picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Let's draw our little sketch over here. The vertex is at 0, 5. How does this parabola open? I'm going to stop for a second and let you think. Think about here. Think about here. How does this parabola open? Well, we said from the beginning it's y squared, so it has to open left or right. And since p has a negative value, it opens to the left. Which tells me what about the focus? Where is the focus? It's 1 unit to the left of this point. So instead of being at 0, 5, it's at -1, 5. 1 unit to the left of that. The directrix, where's the directrix? The directrix is in the opposite direction of the focus. So we moved 1 unit here to get to the focus. We'll move 1 unit back to get to the directrix, and we'll call that x minus 1. And again, why is it x equals 1? Sorry, did I say x minus 1? X equals 1. Why is it x equals 1? Because it's a vertical line, and it's 1 unit away from 0 based on that value of p. It told me to move 1 unit to get to the focus, 1 unit to get to the directrix.